I was out on my ranch, dealing with the usual grind of cattle farming. It was a hard time, the drought making things tougher than usual. I felt lonely most days. I think about that night now and then. It still haunts me. It was late, well past midnight, when I was still in the barn. I had just set down my tools when I heard a knock on the door. I opened it, and there he was, a man with scruffy hair and a tired face. He said his name was Hank. He claimed to have ranching experience, and, maybe because I was exhausted and desperate, I let him in. Looking back, I wonder if that was a mistake. Hank worked hard every day. I was thankful for the help, but soon strange things began happening. One morning, I found 3 cattle missing. I felt panic rise in my chest. I didn't tell Hank because I thought he'd think I was losing it. That night, I heard noises outside the barn, rustling in the shadows. My heart raced as I peered into the darkness, but I didn't see anything. We fell into a rhythm, working late into the night. I started losing track of time. I'd look up at the clock, and suddenly it was hours later. I knew something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I began seeing shapes move in the fields out of the corner of my eye. One night we were outside, and the wind howled. It carried a sound that burrowed deep into my bones. Hank stopped working and stared into the dark, his face strained. "You hear that?" I asked him. He didn't reply. His eyes were distant, almost vacant. I felt a chill wash over me. "Hank, are you all right?" I said. He didn't blink. People in town started whispering when I walked by. Their eyes followed me, and their faces looked strange. I heard stories of a man who once helped a rancher and just vanished, leaving nobody behind. I thought they were trying to scare folks, but the feeling wouldn't shake off. One night, I gathered the courage to ask Hank, "Where do you come from?" His answer made my blood run cold. "It doesn't matter." I turned away from him, but I felt something in the darkness behind me. I didn't see it clearly, but it felt wrong. My heart dropped. I wondered if I was losing my mind altogether. That night, everything took a turn. I tried to shake off the feeling, but I kept thinking of the missing cattle. I barely slept. The next morning, I found Hank sitting outside the barn, staring at nothing. I felt uneasy. Who was he really? Then everything went quiet for one terrible night. Hank never showed up. I looked everywhere on the ranch. The cattle were all accounted for, but something felt heavy in the air. I heard whispers in the wind, and then came the sounds from the shadows. I never saw him again. The ranch feels different now. The days are long, and the nights stretch out into eternity. I still hear the rustling, feel the eyes on me, and wonder what happened to Hank. Maybe I should have never let him in. The days dragged on, and every evening felt heavier than the last. With Hank gone, I had no one to talk to, no one to share the burden. I tried to dismiss my thoughts, but unease settled deep in my bones. I was alone. I made my rounds on the ranch, checking the fences and the cattle. My heart sank each time I scanned the horizon for any sign of movement. Something felt wrong. The usual sounds were muted. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath in anticipation. I decided to go into town, hoping some interaction would lift my spirits. As I stepped into the general store, the chatter stopped and heads turned. I felt eyes burning into me, judging. I approached the counter, and the shopkeeper, a man named Bill, shifted nervously. "Heard anything from Hank?" he finally asked. I shook my head, but a flicker of something crossed his face. Was it fear? That's odd. Folks around here don't just up and leave. I pressed for more information, hoping he could ease my mind, but he only shrugged. "Just be careful, okay?" The warning hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. I left the store in a daze, the whispers of the townsfolk echoing behind me. As night enveloped the ranch, I found myself back in the barn, seeking comfort in the familiar smells of hay and leather. I should have felt safe there,
But everything felt different without Hank, not just empty, but eerie. I started to think Hank should have returned, that he must have had a reason for fading into the night. That's when I heard it again, the rustling outside, louder this time. My heart quickened, pounding against my ribs. I stepped outside, squinting into the darkness, my breath frosty in the cool night air. The moon hung high, casting ghostly shadows over the land, but I felt a chill not from the temperature. There was movement at the edge of my property, shapes darting just out of sight. I blinked hard, straining to make sense of it, but as soon as I focused, they vanished. "Hank?" I called out, my voice trembling. Silence swallowed my question. Then I noticed something strange on the ground, tracks leading away from the barn and toward the distant tree line. My gut twisted as I recognized one of the hoof prints. It was too small for a cow, too big for a deer. It looked wrong. I crouched down to inspect it further, and that's when I saw it. Something shiny half buried in the dirt. I dug it out with my fingers, my heart racing as I uncovered what looked like a metallic badge. A nameplate engraved with Hank. Confusion flooded my mind,
and panic clawed at my throat. Before I could stand, I heard the sound again, a deep growl, low and guttural, echoing between the trees. A chill ran down my spine. I looked over my shoulder, and that's when everything went dark. I blinked, and the darkness melted away, but I still felt disoriented. My heart raced, but now I was lying on the ground next to the barn. I shot up, every nerve in my body on high alert. The growl echoed again, closer this time, vibrating through me. Panic clawed at my throat. I scrambled to my feet and dashed back towards the barn, my breath quick and ragged. The badge slipped from my fingers, but I couldn't stop to look for it. I flung the barn door open, the creak of wood sounding almost deafening in the silence. I grabbed a shovel leaning against a wall, feeling the weight of it in my hands bring a tiny measure of comfort. "Stay calm, just stay calm," I whispered to myself, though my voice shook. I peered out into the darkness, squinting as I fought to catch any sign of movement. The air was thick with tension, and I swear I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows. Then I saw it. A shape, bigger than a dog, slinking just beyond the edge of the barn's dim light. It was low to the ground, sleek and covered in dark fur. But there was something wrong about it, something feral. My heart beat thundering in my ears as it moved cautiously forward. I held the shovel like a shield. "Hank," I called out, desperation creeping into my voice. If it was Hank, where had he been? Why hadn't he come home? The creature froze, and its head tilted. It was not Hank. I could see its eyes glinting in the moonlight, reflecting pale yellow. A growl reverberated again, deeper now, causing my stomach to knot. This wasn't a friendly animal. It looked almost monstrous. I thought of running, but my legs felt rooted to the ground. I couldn't just leave. I had to know what it wanted. I tightened my grip on the shovel and took a step toward it. Fear surged through me, but so did determination. I needed answers. Suddenly, the creature lunged, breaking the stillness with a furious snarl. Instinct kicked in. I swung the shovel, feeling the impact as it collided with its side. A pained yelp pierced the night, but it didn't stop. It only angered it more. Before I could react, it lunged again, swiping its clawed paw towards me. I ducked just in time, and the force of its missed attack sent me stumbling backwards. I slammed against the barn wall. A crack echoed in the night. I scrambled to my feet, breathless and terrified. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats in the distance. At first, I thought it was the creature returning for another attack, but the sound transformed into chaos. I turned my head toward the noise. A group of wild horses erupted from the tree line, galloping frantically past the barn. They flew by in a cloud of dust, a stampede that struck fear into the heart of anything in their path. With the creature distracted, I seized the moment. I bolted away from the barn and ran toward the nearby woods, glancing back only once. The shadow of the creature stood poised, staring after me, its growl fading into the night. I needed to figure out what was happening. I had to find Hank. I couldn't ignore the feeling that he was connected to all this, to whatever dark presence had crept into my life. As I ran, pulse racing, I felt the weight of my fears tightening around me. I had escaped one danger, but what lay ahead? I reached the edge of the trees and hesitated. The night was dark and full of shadows, but I couldn't stop now. I pushed into the brush, determined to uncover the truth, whatever it was. The trees loomed above me as I plunged into the woods, their branches gnarled like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. The stampede of horses faded, but my heart continued to race. I could still hear the growls echoing in my mind. The image of the creature burned in my thoughts. I stumbled through the underbrush, barely able to see. Panic was a fire coursing through my veins. Each snap of a twig sent chills down my spine. I wished for the safety of the barn, but it felt further away than ever. I pressed on, barely aware of where I was heading. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement up ahead. I froze, squinting into the gloom. It was a figure, standing still between the trees. Was it another creature? My body tensed as I gripped the shovel tighter, ready to defend myself if necessary. As I moved closer, the figure stepped into a patch of moonlight. It was a man, Hank! My breath caught. Relief washed over me like a wave. "Hank!" I called out, running toward him. But as I reached him, my heart sank. Hank looked different. His clothes were torn, dirt smeared across his face, and there was a wild look in his eyes. This wasn't the Hank I knew. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, his gaze flitting beyond me, not meeting my eyes. I was looking for you," he stammered. "There's something out here." His words tumbled out, hurried and frantic. "I didn't want to leave, but it's like they're watching. They want something." "Who? What are you talking about?" My voice trembled. I needed answers, but he seemed lost in a world of fear. He stepped back, glancing over his shoulder. "We need to go. We shouldn't be here." An uneasy feeling crept into my stomach. I had come to find Hank, but this wasn't the reunion I had hoped for. I could sense a dark energy surrounding him. "Hank, what did you see?" Before he could respond, I heard it, the sound I dreaded. A growl, low and menacing, rumbled from the trees. The creature was back. My pulse quickened, and the biting chill of fear enveloped me again. Hank seemed to snap back to reality. He turned, eyes wide with terror. "We have to hide," he shouted, grabbing my arm as he pulled me deeper into the woods. I barely had time to protest or consider what was happening. As we stumbled through the brush, the growling grew louder, a guttural sound that sent shocking jolts of fear through me. Whatever it was closer than before. There was no clarity, just the instinct to survive. Then we stumbled into a small clearing, moonlight spilling in all around us. I had to get out of there. I wanted to call for help, but the fear tightened my throat. The growl echoed again, now just on the other side of a sprawling bush. That's when I saw it, a pair of eyes, glinting and yellow, watching us from the shadows. The creature had found us. My heart pounded as those yellow eyes stared at us. I could feel the air grow thick around me. "Hank," I whispered, trying to hold back the wave of panic rising within me. "What do we do?" He didn't answer. Instead, he tugged me further back toward the trees, his fingers digging into my arm. The growl came again, louder this time. It reverberated in my chest. The creature emerged from the shadows, muscles rippling beneath its matted fur, its breath visible in the cool night air. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't some wild animal. It was massive, nearly the size of a horse, and the hunger in its eyes made my skin crawl. My mind raced. How did we end up here? Why hadn't Hank told me sooner? "Stay quiet," Hank hissed, crouching low.
But how could I stay quiet? I was terrified, and my breath felt like a scream trapped in my throat. The creature sniffed the air, looking past us, or maybe right through us. I could hear it shifting, its claws digging into the earth. It took a step forward, and I instinctively backed up, stepping on a branch that snapped loud enough to wake the dead. The creature whipped its head around, and for a moment we locked eyes. A guttural snarl erupted, sending a rush of cold through me. I stumbled backward, terrified. "Run!" Hank yelled, breaking me from my trance. We bolted toward the edge of the clearing, dodging low branches and thick bushes. I could hear the creature crashing through the underbrush behind us. Each rush of air from its powerful limbs threatened to swallow me back into the darkness. "Hank, where are we going?" I shouted as we pushed onward. The trees began to thin out, but the growling stayed close, relentless.
It let out another deep growl, sending shivers down my spine. Hank glanced toward the door, his expression torn. This is it. We take a chance. He creaked open the door just enough to peer out. My heart raced as he signaled me to follow. "On 3, he whispered. 1, 2. "Wait," I interrupted. "What if it's right there?" But Hank was already pushing through, stepping quietly over the threshold. I hesitated for barely a moment before joining him, my feet moving almost on instinct. The night air was cold against my skin. We stood in the shadows of the doorway, the moonlight illuminating nothing but thick darkness beyond. My eyes darted toward the noise that echoed from the underbrush. The growling had stopped? Did that mean it had lost our trail? "Where do we go?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Follow me. We need to head back to the edge of the forest," Hank instructed, low and firm. With steeled resolve, we moved quickly through the trees, steering clear of branches that threatened to snag or trip us. My mind raced with possibilities, but I pushed them down. We just had to keep running. As we crept further away from the cabin, I felt a shift in the air. It was colder, heavier, and I had a nagging feeling that we weren't alone. Suddenly, the air erupted with a loud crash, branches splintering and thudding against the ground. My stomach dropped. It was the creature breaking through the underbrush. "Hurry!" Hank shouted. I stumbled, driven forward by sheer adrenaline. But then I glanced back and froze. The glowing eyes were right there, closer than ever. I could see the massive shape pushing through the foliage. Just then I tripped, falling hard against the damp earth. I scrambled to get up, panic flooding me again. I barely had a moment to process it before Hank pulled me up, urgency in his grip. "Get moving," he roared, pushing me ahead. I didn't look back again. We sprinted deeper into the woods, desperately searching for any way to escape. Out of breath and feeling like I might collapse, I spotted a clearing up ahead. "There," I gasped. But then came a horrifying realization as I entered the open space. We weren't just running away. We had just run straight into a trap. The moment I stepped out, I knew something was very wrong. It was eerily quiet. Too quiet. The stillness wrapped around us like a thick blanket. I could feel the tension radiating from Hank as we stood frozen in the clearing. There were no sounds of the forest, no rustling leaves or chirping crickets, just an oppressive silence that pressed down on us. "Are we safe here?" I whispered, my voice cutting through the quiet. I could barely hear it myself, but Hank didn't respond. His gaze was locked on the other side of the clearing, where shadows danced like whispers just beyond the edge of the forest. Moonlight. I strained to hear anything, but it was like the world had paused. Then it hit me. A faint but chilling sound. A heartbeat, but not ours. It belonged to something lurking nearby. The growl from before echoed in my mind, but now it seemed more menacing, closer. "Hank," I started, but he raised a hand. "Stay quiet," he said, his eyes narrowing in concentration. A flicker of movement caught my eye, and I instinctively leaned in closer to Hank. In the dark, I could see the outline of trees bending. Something was creeping around just beyond our sight. A pulse of panic shot through me as I searched the tree line for the source. Then I saw it. A figure, humanoid but somehow distorted, gliding between the trees. The glowing eyes were a stark reminder of our pursuer. They were watching us, hungry and alert. The figure turned just slightly, and I caught a glimpse of a jagged mouth stretched in a silent snarl. My breath caught in my throat. This was no ordinary creature. "Hank," I hissed, my voice trembling. "We need to move." But before he could respond, the figure moved faster. In a blink, it dashed from the shadows. The growling was back, louder and more feral, echoing around us like thunderclaps. "Run!" Hank shouted, grabbing my hand and pulling me away from the opening. We raced back into the trees, the cold air whipping against us. My heart hammered in my chest as branches scraped against my skin. The growl chased us, a constant reminder that we were not yet free. I dared to glance back, desperate to see how close it was. The creature was right there, its form impossibly agile and colossal, gaining on us with each leap. "Left!" Hank yelled, veering off our path. I followed, knowing I had to trust him, even as my legs felt heavy with fear. The trees began to thin. I spotted a small dip in the ground ahead. "This way!" I shouted, hoping it would provide us some cover. We hit the hollow just as the creature lunged, its claws swiping through the air where we had just been. The ground beneath me slanted, and I lost my footing, sliding to the bottom. Hank followed, landing beside me with a grunt, both of us panting hard. It was dark and cool in this little depression. I hardly dared to move. I started, but before I finished, we heard it again, the growling, even closer now, rumbling like a distant storm. I looked over at Hank, his face pale in the dark. "We have to be quick. It might follow us down." A terrible crack echoed above us. The creature was searching, smashing through branches loudly. "Now!" Hank urged, but just then a low snarl sent ice through my veins. It sounded directly above us. That's when I saw it. Long, thin arms stretching down, claws glinting in the pale moonlight. Everything within me screamed that we were utterly trapped. And then, with great effort, it began to descend. The creature lunged lower, its claws raking the air, and my heart raced with a primal fear. I ducked, pushing myself further into the dirt. Hank and I huddled together, our breaths shallow and rapid. The damp earth felt cold against my skin, but the presence above us was far more chilling. "Wait for the right moment," Hank whispered, his voice barely audible over the growl that reverberated around us. I clenched my teeth, straining to hear anything besides the menacing sounds of the beast. Suddenly there was silence, and I dared to look up. The creature's eyes glinted in the shadows, almost mocking, as it peered down at us like a predator playing with its prey. Then I saw something that sent a shudder through me. A glinting object on its arm, a tool or weapon of some sort that dangled close to its claws. My mind raced. What could it be? It was grotesque, twisted like the creature itself, but it held a promise of potential danger. "Hank, we need to move," I urged, my voice trembling. "It hasn't found us yet." He nodded, his expression fierce but his eyes betraying worry. On 3. 1, 2, 3. We sprang to our feet, launching ourselves out of the hollow. I stumbled, the uneven ground making my feet clumsy, but there was no time to stop and regain my balance. We dashed toward the nearest cluster of trees, the growl erupting again, angrier now that we had escaped its hiding spot. Branches whipped at me, but I pushed through, hearing Hank's footsteps echoing beside me. But then a deafening crash sounded from behind as the beast vaulted out of the hollow. It was relentless, chasing us further into the darkness, its eyes bright like twin stars hungry for a meal. "Left!" Hank shouted again, and instinctively I turned with him into a tighter thicket. The branches closed around us, but it offered no real shield against the creature roaring through the night. I could feel each breath like a flame in my chest, every step a battle against the panic clawing at my mind. Ahead, I noticed a faint glimmer, a small clearing up ahead. "There," I pointed. We could make it, but it would mean risking the open ground. As we broke free of the thicket, I spotted the glimmer was just a shallow pond, shimmering eerily under the moonlight. "We can hide in the water," I yelled over my shoulder. "Are you crazy?" Hank shot back, glancing at the creature now thundering toward us. "It'll see us." "It might lose our scent," I insisted. Before Hank could argue, I plunged into the water, the shock of the cold hitting me like a jolt. I beckoned for Hank, who hesitated, eyes darting back to our pursuer. Then, with a silent agreement, he followed. We submerged ourselves, holding our breath. The water was murky, but it felt like a sanctuary, the precious ripples muffling the world above. I strained to listen, trying to assess if the creature had followed. But then I heard something that froze me. The creature's growl had stopped. Instead, a sudden silence enveloped us, and I fought to keep panic from bubbling up in my throat. It was too quiet. After a moment, Hank surfaced beside me, his eyes wide. "What now?" he whispered urgently. "What if it's gone?" I glanced around. "We can't risk it. We have to wait here a little longer." That's when I noticed something glittering at the edge of my vision, submerged in the water. My heart dropped as the realization sank in. It wasn't just a trick of the light. There was something at the bottom. A clue, perhaps, or even proof of something worse. Then, just as I reached for it, I felt a sudden, sharp tug on my leg from below. My scream erupted into the hush, swallowed by the darkness above. I kicked my leg instinctively, the shock tightening my chest. My heart pounded as I thought of the creature looming above. It couldn't have found us this quickly. I glanced down, dread pooling in my stomach. Whatever had a grip on me wasn't letting go. "Hank," I gasped, my voice barely breaking the water's surface. He looked panicked, eyes darting nervously around, trying to figure out what was happening. I could feel the pull intensifying, dragging me deeper. "Hold on," he shouted, grabbing my arm, and I felt his grip tighten around me. I had to fight back. I wouldn't go down without a fight. What if it was the creature's arm, its claws curling around my leg? With a surge of adrenaline, I thrashed in the water, breaking free from the unseen grasp. I shot back upwards, gasping for air. I was still disoriented, but the sensation of the cold enveloping me grounded me again. My eyes searched the dark water, now on high alert. "That was too close," I sputtered, shaking off the eerie sensation that lingered on my skin. But my relief was short-lived. Just then, through the murky depths, I caught a glimpse of the glimmer again, the thing I had seen before. It called to me, some desperate part of my mind wanting to know what it was. "Did you see that?" I asked Hank, pointing towards the spot. "There's something down there." "Forget it," he hissed, dragging me towards the bank. "Whatever's down there isn't safe. We should get out." As I watched the water ripple away from me, the glimmer grew dimmer. But curiosity was a persistent itch. "We have to look," I insisted, though dread dripped into my voice. "If it's linked to the creature—" Hank's face paled.
This is insane. We can't just dive deeper for some shiny object while that thing is hunting us. But I could feel the pull of urgency. Maybe it was a weapon, a clue, something to give us an advantage. I wasn't ready to give
Up this chance. All right, I replied, catching my breath. I'll go under and check. You keep watch. Before he could protest further, I took a deep breath, plunging back into the chilly water. The murkiness engulfed me, and I felt the cold wrap around me like a vice. I swam deeper, my fingers stretching out toward the dull glimmer. As I neared the bottom, the object rose into clarity. It was a twisted metal shard, sharp and jagged. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I reached for it. Just as my fingers grasped the cold surface, a shadow shifted above me, obstructing the faint light. I turned, and my stomach plummeted. The creature was back, its massive form breaching the surface, eyes glowing ferociously. Panic surged, and I kicked back toward the surface, clutching the shard tightly. "Hank!" I screamed, my voice muffled underwater. I broke through the surface just as he began to dive in after me. The creature let out a deafening roar, sensing its prey so close. "Get out!" I yelled, and with a swift motion, I tossed the metal shard to Hank. "Take it! We can use it!" He caught it instinctively, eyes wide with a blend of awe and fear. I swam back toward him, the water around us rippling as the creature lunged forward. "We need to go! Now!" he yelled, urgency coloring his tone. As we scrambled back to shore, I felt the creature's breath behind us, a sickening warmth that reminded me just how deadly our game was. But the moment we reached the bank, I felt something strange pulsing in my veins, not just from our escape, but from the shard. It was sewn into the hunt, and I realized that whatever secrets lay between us and that beast were only starting to reveal themselves. And that realization filled me with dread. A low growl echoed behind us, and I knew we weren't safe yet. As we scrambled away from the water's edge, I felt the weight of the shard in my hand, a sudden, heavy connection that surged through me as if it held secrets of its own. We dashed through the trees, branches clawing our faces, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being hunted, still trapped in some twisted game. "Hank, do you have any idea what that thing is?" I panted as we raced onward. His eyes darted toward the dense thicket behind us, where the growls continued, an orchestra of rage vibrating through the forest. "No," he replied, breathless, "but it's not just hunting us for sport. It's after something, for us." I didn't want to believe him, but the panic clawing at my own chest urged me to accept his truth. Whatever it wasn't the animalistic fear that made it dangerous. It was something deeper, something malignant. I glanced at the shard, feeling its cold surface against my hand. Maybe it held the answer. Ahead, a narrow path opened. Between the trees, I grasped Hank's arm and pulled him toward it. "This way!" I urged, desperate to escape the clutches of whatever pursued us. The growls faded, but I knew better than to relax. We were still corners in a predator's maze. The path twisted and turned, leading us toward the edge of the woods. I could hear my heart pounding as adrenaline surged through my veins. Then, without warning, we broke through into a clearing. The moon shone down on what looked like an old graveyard, stone markers jutting out of the earth like broken teeth. "Why is there a graveyard here?" I whispered, feeling a chill creep along my spine. Hank looked around uneasily. "I can't say for sure, but I've heard stories about this place, about how many people have disappeared around here. Some say they never left." His voice dropped as he glanced toward me. Before I could respond, the ground trembled beneath our feet. The growl echoed again, louder now, vibrating through the air and resonating in my bones, signaling the creature had found us. "We need to hide!" I frantically scanned our surroundings until I spotted a tall tombstone behind thick bushes. "Quick!" I tugged Hank behind the stone, our bodies pressed close, both of us trembling.
Every instinct screamed that it was close enough to sense our fear. The visibility on my memories of Hank blurred. This wasn't my ally any longer. As we crouched there, I could see shapes moving just beyond the graves, darker than shadows. The air grew thick with expectation. Then, a deep growl rolled through the air, sending a shiver down my spine. "It knows we're here," I gasped, clutching the shard tighter in my palm. Hank's face was pale, the wild look I had seen before creeping back in. "What will we do?" he mouthed, panic in his eyes. I couldn't let him drown in fear. "We fight. Whatever it is that's here, we face it together." I glanced over my shoulder. The growling had stopped, and an eerie silence hung between us. "On three?" he nodded slowly. 1, 2, 3. We jumped from behind the tombstone, and instinctively I raised the shard. The moonlight gleamed off its ragged edge as I shouted, "Get back!" The creature emerged from the shadows, a form I could barely comprehend, twisted and wild, its glowing eyes locked onto me. I swung the shard toward it, half-hearted, half-fearful. But, surprisingly, the creature recoiled, a low hiss escaping its jagged mouth. The ground quaked, but I felt a surge of electricity course through me, as if the shard had become an anchor. It was infused with energy, an understanding that resonated deep within. Hank held on to my arm, his breath quick and shallow. "What is it?" "I don't know," I shouted back, my focus purely on the creature. "But it's afraid." As if sensing our togetherness, the creature paused, its growl morphing into something else, curiosity mixed with a deliberate rage. It paced before us, as if weighing its options, the air thick with unrevealed truths. "Stay close," I murmured to Hank, keeping my grip steady on the shard. If this was truly a fight against a primal force, I wouldn't do it alone. Suddenly, a series of flickering shadows filled the edges of the cemetery. Figures emerged, pale and ghostly, as if long-forgotten souls had come to witness. I felt a rush of uncertainty. "Told you it was tied to the past," Hank breathed, eyes wide with awe. The creature seemed to share a connection with these shadows, silent as they gathered around it. Time stretched as I felt every heartbeat become a resonant echo, intertwining with the life we had fought to protect. Then something snapped, a frantic surge from the creature. It lunged forward, and for a moment I feared the weight of darkness winning. But just as it propelled towards us, the shard pulsed in my hand, illuminating the space with a blinding glow. I didn't know if it was instinct or trust, but I plunged the shard into the ground at our feet. For a breathless second, the world inhaled, and then the vibrant glow emanated outward, wrapping around the creature and the shadows, merging them into a wild dance of light and sound. I felt Hank's hand grip mine like a lifeline. Together, we watched as the creature stopped mid-lunge, suspended in this bizarre ambiance. What happened next was beyond understanding. Light and dark swirled around us, neither victorious nor defeated, intertwining in a push and pull I couldn't quite comprehend. The shadows formed around the creature, as if embracing it, but didn't consume it. Then, as quickly as it began, the energy dwindled, leaving only silence once more. The creature stood at the edge of the glow, breathing hard, those angry eyes now filled with a different kind of fire. Curiosity? Respect? And just like that, it retreated into the woods, weaving through the trees until it was gone. Hank and I exchanged a glance, our heavy breaths breaking the stillness. Safety hadn't returned entirely, but a new uncertainty lingered in the air. The reality of what we had witnessed, mutating my understanding of everything that had transpired. "What just happened?" Hank whispered, his eyes wide. I shook my head, still processing it all. "I don't know, but I think it's not over." I think about it sometimes, how I felt that night in the woods. how some truths are woven tight with shadows and light. Perhaps Hank was still out there, or whatever drew him to me lingered under the surface, waiting for a chance to drag me back into that unknown. A part of me, though, wished I could wash my hands of it, as if escaping to a simpler life on the ranch would erase it all. But the questions remain, and I suppose they always will. Was it just in my mind, or was something more sinister thriving in the dark? Whatever the answer, I can't help but look over my shoulder whenever.
Evening falls, wondering if the creature still watches, waiting for its moment to step out of those shadows once more.